right, there we go. We're recording. So again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Bafaro. I'm the School Safety Program Manager here at the Northwest Educational Services District, and we are so pleased to have with us our trainers and our presenters here today. We have Elise Morris. She's the Executive Director of Cultivating Healthy Athletes Who Move with Purpose, or CHAMP. She's the Director of Community Outreach and Expansion for TeamUp Washington, and she is a professional athlete. She's joined by Jessie Spinney, who's a prevention coordinator with the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, or WSCADV. And we have Ward Urion, senior prevention strategist with the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and just turn things over to them.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All
Hi. Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you so much for spending the next 90 minutes with us today and then another 90 minutes with us on Thursday. We're really excited to be in community with you all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and because I have several things up and several screens, so this will be a great opportunity for you to get cozy and settled, just so I can get my stuff set up properly. But yeah, just really excited to be with you all today to talk about athletes as leaders. Thank you to Erin and Bryn for organizing this with us. Really grateful for the opportunity. All right. So can everyone see my screen? Perfect. Okay. Let me just make sure this is set up properly. Okay, there's that. Okay, I think I have everything situated. Let's do this really quick. Apologies, there's no way for me to do this like ahead of time. Okay, I think we're golden. But yeah, thank you again, everybody. We're here to talk about athletes as leaders. This session specifically is going to focus on talking about sports as a platform for social change. Thank you, Erin, for doing our intros. You see our lovely faces here with our titles and pronouns. So thank you again, Erin, for introducing us. So we like to start off our session by really highlighting the kind of core components, principles, ways that we like to navigate doing not just this work in general, but specifically how athletes as leaders operates. And also kind of the community agreements that we like to put forward in all the trainings that we do, including today. And so these key principles are what really ground athletes as leaders. And so those are health and safety, inclusive and welcoming community, empathy, consent, gender and racial equity, and youth leadership. So as coaches or mentors or advocates or folks who are working with youth in any capacity, you all play a really important role in creating creating a positive culture for the youth that you're working with, right? And that's a really big opportunity, right? To make a really positive impact, not just on the youth that you're working with, but on the community that you're a part of, that these youth are a part of, right? So these core principles, like I said, are also going to operate as our community agreements together. So we want this to be a space that's really grounded within support and equity, mutual respect, compassion, inclusivity. And again, those are the things that we, are wanting to promote with the youth that we're working with too, to create school or team environments that are really positive and supportive for everyone. So it feels important for us to name those things before we dive in, to both really ground the intention of athletes as leaders, but also ground us within the community that we want to create together for our next little bit of time together. So we would love some input from you all in terms of what brings you to this session. What piqued your interest about this session? It's also helpful to know to maybe throw in there what your role is, where you're located, what your role is, and then also what kind of prompted you to, commit a decent chunk of your time to learning about this with us. It's just helpful for us to kind of know what brings people into this space. So we have this QR code here. If you just hover over it with your camera, click on that, and we'll give folks just a couple of minutes to fill that out.
And
And
this
then,
is,
oh yeah,
oh
go
yeah,
ahead, please.
I was gonna say this is a new model for us, so we're trying some new kind of engagement tactics. So for this one, we ask you all to take out your phones and with your camera app, click basically on the QR code and it should open a link. If this happens to not work for us or is not a good tactic, please let us know. Um, a lot of this session is new content that we made specifically for you all and also that we're hoping to use in the future. So this is like an opportunity for you all to also give us some honest feedback and for us to kind of tailor this content as it is the first time we're rolling it out. And so if anybody is struggling with this option, we have a plan to continue using these questions and this like poll. So far I have one submission, two submissions, which is exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which should show this little word cloud that we're building together. Um, and I just love to know what brings us all to this work, right? I think part of the introductions that we can share individually is uh, the reasons why we came to Team Up Washington, maybe while people are filling this out, Jessie and or Ward. But I am, I have a very special relationship with athletes as leaders. I was introduced to it first as a student athlete in high school. So I was part of not the pilot group, but the first year that this program was rolled out at Garfield High School in Seattle, Washington by Rebecca Milliman. And so as a member of the women's high school soccer team, we went through Athletes as Leaders. We did this programming and it absolutely changed my life. Since then, I've come back and interned for Athletes as Leaders in Team Up Washington. I'm a co-author of the current content of Athletes as Leaders and get to come back and do these training sessions for you all to continue spreading Athletes as Leaders to as many communities as possible. Um, and I relate with all of you in what brings you to this session, right? To learn, engage, to continue sharing these principles and these community standards with young people that we are in community with, violence prevention, helping youth. So that's really exciting. Ward, do you want to share a little bit about your relationship with Athletes as Leaders? What brings you to this session?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I had been implementing coaching boys and men for about 15 years and had always been wanting something that would round that out and complement the offering that was so specifically designed for implementation with boys teams. And this was like a dream come true. And when Rebecca and the other folks, including Elise, finally did develop this. It was like it really just rounded out everything that we needed for shifting the social norms on school campuses, and so really fantastic um, opportunity for us to share that with you today, and increasingly we're hearing from communities around the state saying that this really suffices for a gender inclusive curriculum that involves youth of all genders and really speaks to the concerns and strengths available within the athletic community to develop leaders that can help create the communities that we want.
Awesome. Jessie, do you want to add your little 2 cents?
Yeah, no, I mean, I really come to this work with a background in community organizing first and foremost. Did a lot of community organizing around progressive issues, social justice issues when I was in college, and then learned that violence prevention work, which is community organizing at its core was a job. And so really lucked out being able to find my dream career. But I also come specifically within the realm of athletes as leaders. I did not grow up being an athlete. I did some sports here and there, but also come from a family that's from Michigan, so we're big hockey fans, Detroit Lions fans. So grew up really appreciating the camaraderie that you feel being a part of like a sports fandom, um, and the community that that builds. But on the flip side too, I was also pretty severely bullied by the school athletes when I was in school. So I also experienced the very negative, toxic ways that, I mean, just high school and middle school in general can lead to folks experiencing. But I think that kind of dynamic around creating this kind of like hierarchy that can happen among within schools when it comes to athletics that can be really harmful. While also, again, like having just such a deep love for the ways that like following the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Lions and Pistons has like had on my life and my family and community. I don't want to talk about how last weekend went. It was horrible for Detroit sports, but like there is something deeply intrinsic, I think, about feeling like you are connected to something, even if it's something as fairly inconsequential to the state of the world as how well your sports team is doing, right? But there is something about that community connection that I find really valuable. And I think the lessons that sports can teach young people are incredibly important. I think it's an opportunity to really support youth as they are navigating being a human. And yeah, so that's kind of how I come to this work. And just am really excited about the opportunity to continue to talk to people about this programming because I think it has a really big opportunity to provide support to youth that they might not have a lot of access to otherwise, and really encourage and support them to create the communities that they want to see, that are really grounded within safety and respect and empathy. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. I think we can you can take the sharing back over, Jessie, if you'd like, but I think that's a really great segue into how many different inroads there are to this topic and this impact and our common understanding. Do I have to stop my sharing for you to start sharing, Jessie? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
You're good. You're good to go,
Sorry.
Elise.
Okay. Perfect. And that we all want you to be coming from your individual perspectives as we continue working through the session. Some of you may be coaches, some of you, like you said, are club advisors, working with youth at different capacities or different levels. And so please apply. This content is made for people accessing it at different in different ways.
And
So,
Elise, really quick, I'm still on Zoom. I'm still seeing your screen.
right, are you able to share and like
Well,
over
it says
mine
that
or
I'm sharing, but I'm
oh,
seeing yours. I don't know if everyone else is seeing.
okay, I'm stopping sharing now. This is a good logistical thing to cover. I'm not seeing any. Oh wow. Is there multiple tabs?
Oh, there might be. Here, I
And
just stopped sharing and I'll reshare right now.
we were seeing Jessie, we were seeing your screen.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Perfect.
interesting. Okay, beautiful. Well,
Good
then
to
we're
go.
right on track. So, to dive a little bit into what brings us all here and what is our purpose, right? Hopefully, Athletes as Leaders is going to encompass all of this in its design to be a completely gender inclusive program for high school athletes. Like Ward was mentioning, this is was originally created as a complement to coaching boys into men, but in its current adaptation is completely gender inclusive. It is meant to be implemented with athletes on boys teams, athletes on girls teams, co-ed or all gender sports, right? Like track teams, wrestling teams, things of that nature. We are also hoping that this is not only a tool for athletes to navigate social and emotional challenges that they're facing in high school, but also a tool for coaches, right? We know that goal setting in the athletic context is super important. It helps us guide the direction of our season and get us on the same page. And that is just as important for on the field goals as it is for off the field goals. That when we set a common culture about what does it mean to be on this soccer team, not only as teammates and the way that we prioritize clean passes, effective communication, but also off the field. How do we treat each other? How do we navigate borrowing equipment, disagreeing with each other, relating with other people in our community outside of our locker room? Having a common culture setting tool for that built in through the hopefully accessible and laid out script, right? Which Athletes as Leaders is a really great tool to make that happen. We are data driven and written for and by athletes. So we did a 2017 study done through the University of Pittsburgh, I believe. Ward, if that's not true, please jump in. Who we found some statistically significant data about the outcomes of this program that we will go through later on in the session. And it is written for and by high school athletes. Rebecca is the original founder and author of this, and she worked directly with high school athletes at Garfield to talk about the topics that felt most important to them, the language that felt most accessible to them, in order to create a program that creates a space to target kind of like the most relevant and effective content that we can for high school athletes. Let's see. Okay, I think we are good to go.
So we also think it's important to kind of ground ourselves within this really important context of why, for us, it's really important to meld the social change potential that sports carries with the issues at hand that our youth are experiencing, particularly when it comes to domestic violence, teen dating violence, sexual violence. Because that's at its core what this programming really is it is grounded within public health approaches designed to address the root causes of interpersonal violence, right? Through sports as an organizing platform. And we also know that it's helpful to kind of conceptualize the scale of this issue, especially when our society, unfortunately, is not very good at talking about these things in honest ways. So a good way to kind of start that conversation is by just looking at the stats. The one caveat that I always give before I talk about statistics related to domestic violence and sexual assault is that these numbers that we're going to talk about are low, probably severely low, because of the nature of this type of trauma. Folks are not always super inclined to share their experiences of trauma and abuse, particularly from marginalized communities, which we also know experience the highest rates of interpersonal violence. So communities of color, specifically Indigenous communities, LGBTQ and trans folks, folks who are experiencing homelessness or housing or food insecurity, folks with disabilities. I can't talk about these without naming that first, right? Which also makes these stats, I think, a little heavier, knowing that it's higher than what these already really concerning numbers are. So I also want to name too, if you're feeling heavy after this conversation, we are too, and that is okay. And we're available to chat at a later time after this. These things are not easy to discuss, and it's hard to just like talk about them and move on. So I want to name that as well. But based off the stats that we do have, and these are stats that are coming from RAIN, which is the Rape and Incest National Network, NSVRC, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, and then the Healthy Youth Survey results from 2023. So based off of that data that we have, 1 in 3 US teens and 1 in 5 Washington teens experience dating violence. So that is before they turn 18. So 1 in 3 across the country, and then 1 in 5 in Washington. I can tell you it's higher than 1 in 5, without a doubt. 74% of child sexual abuse victims know their perpetrator very well, are deeply connected to them, either through familial or community ties. And 50% of those types of instances of harm are actually perpetrated by teenagers themselves. And those teenagers were most likely harmed at some point when they were younger as well. And girls ages 14 to 19 are about 4 times more likely to experience sexual assault. Again, that is based off of the data that we have, but I also want to name that the stats for young men and boys experiencing domestic violence, teen dating violence, or sexual assault are incredibly high, but the data does not reflect that because of the guilt and the shame and embarrassment that can come up when it comes to young men and boys disclosing. And I think also the statistic, one additional statistic that's not on here, in Washington state specifically, based off the data we have, 1 in 3 teenage girls will also experience sexual assault before they turn 18. So again, like, I'm feeling heavy after talking about those things. I want to make sure that we're acknowledging the weight of that, knowing that you all are in an environment where you're working with teens and kiddos, right? And so it's hard knowing that this is something that's going on. So again, just want to offer up opportunities for connection post this, if you'd like to talk. Yeah, it just feels, I can't do stats and just say, here's the stats and move on. So, or at least not do it and feel intentional or human. So I appreciate folks giving me that extra bit of time to kind of really name these things. But yeah, that's why we're here. That's why Ward and I and Elise and I have these jobs because it's a big issue. But we also know that there's a lot of power within community organizing and prevention work that can get these numbers lower. Okay.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Jessie, for doing the hard work of going through those statistics with us. I think we know that this is, these statistics, whether we know them concretely or not, are a big reason why we come to sessions like these. They're also big reasons why we care about working with young people, care about doing it well and with intention, and that it's an important part of how we think about our work with young people, especially in spaces where these statistics and this narrative might not be at the forefront of the type of work that we're doing with young people, right? Such as sports, right? People, there's this potential disconnect between what sports is all about and sexual assault prevention. And we are actually, we are here to kind of bridge that gap and say that, due to these statistics and what we know is much higher, that there are victims and survivors in every single team, right? There are perpetrators in every single team. There are potentially young people who are both, who may not even know it. And that is a part of what young people bring to the table in any type of work and in every aspect of their lives, including sports. And that ultimately sports is about relationships. And that's where we harness the power of sports in order to continue the work of implementing important, what we'll get into are protective factors against what this problem is that we have identified and the reason we're here, right? So our goal of the program from a public health model is to prevent violence by identifying a problem, right, which is the underreported sexual assault and domestic violence rates of young people in high school. to identify the risk factors. These include things like harmful social scripts about gender, race, age, and sexuality, which we'll get a little bit further into later in the session, right? Peer pressure, the strength of wanting to belong or wanting to fit in based off of what the people around us are doing or saying are okay or not okay. Fear of isolation, right? Um, a lack of empathy or a lack of access or skills around empathy. We know that post-COVID, this is something that's showing up a lot in our communities, especially in our young communities. That sense of disempowerment is a huge risk factor, lack of agency in our choices or the spaces that we show up in or how other people treat us or the boundaries we can set with them. Harmful norms and expectations around what does it mean to be a blank, right? Whether that be a teammate, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a student, an athlete, right? These norms and expectations that perpetuate harm and toxic relationship models, that might come from our families, that might come from our peers, that can come from any place, right? So that our goal is to identify these risk factors and then using a public health approach. Go ahead, Jessie. We are actively and intentionally building community norms that minimize these negative conditions and address these risk factors by boosting conditions that help communities and individuals from these negative kind of harmful factors, right? So the goals of the program that have also been kind of statistically proven are these protective factors, so that when you are up here with your script, in doing session 7 of Athletes as Leaders, that these aren't just words on a page. These aren't just like la-di-da themes that are important and that you might know really well, rather that these are tools and core pieces of culture that you are disseminating that become the tools for young people to protect themselves and to encourage their community to have all these protective factors against sexual assault and domestic violence, right? So this looks like increased gender equitable attitudes, increased sense of leadership, that there's a general sense of inclusion and support and belonging within the team setting, that athletes are willing to intervene in situations of harm, be able to identify something that isn't right and step in, to increase the positive norms within a team, right, and decrease the negative ones, and understand a healthy versus unhealthy relationship. This is the whole deal of the program, right, is that we are arming young people through our narratives and through discussion to be able to have agency within the world that is often handed down to them. Let's see. With that in mind, we are going to now dive a little bit more concretely into the program. So we have our video, which we will hear from high school students, including myself, who have gone through the program and kind of their opinions and the power they feel having gone through the sessions.
All right. I'm just getting the video set up on the audio side of things. Share sound. All right. And once I hit play, if I could just get a quick thumbs up if the audio is working, that would be great.
Most people look up to athletes and think like that they're a role model that they can follow. I don't know, high school is definitely a time where you become like more self-conscious and aware of yourself with everything you're doing. There's no better time to learn about these things than right now, because it's kind of when we need it the most.
So sessions are a really intimate experience. I think for the team it's a great bonding experience for everyone. We're down in the theater room having just a normal conversation about things that happen, you know, in everyday life and things that are difficult to talk about in other situations, but it makes it a really comfortable space.
We talk about how relationships should be and what respect looks like.
A few weeks ago, we were talking about consent and inequalities.
What I took away the most was that there are other people who care about this too. It gets that conversation going. A lot of the things that I learned from it had to do with when a relationship isn't a healthy relationship.
You know, it really like let me express how I'm feeling, and it let me be who I wanted to be in there. And so when we leave, we just feel like a better person. We feel more confident in our game.
You can expect to learn a lot about your team and other people and kind of step into other people's shoes and think from their perspective.
The more you participate and the more you actually try to learn from it, the more you'll actually get from it.
There are a ton of valuable lessons that you can learn, and we're more bonded and more of a community.
Okay, just give me 1 second to get back to the presentation. I always love watching you in that video, Elise. Look at you now.
It's so funny. I would say the same things now that I said then. But it's so cool. All of my friends, I have friends on the volleyball team who are in that video, who I'm still friends with today. And it is really cool to have witnessed that, Garfield was one of the only schools that we know of. This might not be true, or there is possibly schools who have gone through it in the same way. But our principal at the time made a really intentional effort and said that all teams were going to go through some type of programming, whether that be coaching boys and men or athletes as leaders. And so you see all these different sports being involved in this programming, and the shift in culture during those few years that we were doing athletes as leaders and coaching boys and men was really felt historical at our school. So it's cool I get that sense every time I watch the video. With that being said, Jessie, do you want to go in? We're gonna do this mostly through the chat.
Yeah, so we want to give you all an opportunity to share some of your thoughts when it comes to this topic. And we really like to dive into this question because it's really crucial to understand kind of the social fabric that we're all working within when it comes to sexual assault and domestic violence. And by social fabric, I mean the messages that we kind of hear and are socialized around when it comes to these issues. And so we want to hear from you all in the chat, or you can also feel free to come off of mute and share that way. But just thinking about what are some of the societal messages that we hear around how to prevent sexual assault. Or what you need to do in order to prevent sexual assault. And so I'll start with an example just to get some ideas going. But I think one of the most common ones that we hear throughout our society when it comes to rape or sexual violence is don't walk home alone at night, right? In order to avoid being assaulted, you probably shouldn't walk outside when it's dark. Right? That's a pretty common one. So with that kind of example in mind, would love to see some of your thoughts or other examples in the chat. And Elise, if you wouldn't mind reading those out, or Ward, I I can't have another window open.
I got you. Someone said, don't get blackout drunk, right? That the amount of alcohol we drink is the reason why someone may be assaulted. Absolutely. Or acts as consent for someone to uh, commit assault. 100%. Yeah, we had someone kind of like boosting that message. Absolutely. Someone mentioned about the way they dress, to not dress provocatively, that the clothing we wear can is uh like reason in itself or is consent. Yeah. Ward, I'm curious. Ward does our coaching boys into men sessions. I'm wondering if y'all do you have a like coaching boys into men version of this question? Like, what are the narratives targeted towards men and boys?
Yeah, no. And I think that it's just indicative of the gendered nature of where we place the responsibility to avoid being a target, right? And so it's not, you know, when it comes to coaching boys into men and the kinds of concepts that we're trying to include there is that you're responsible for your behavior. And you need to take responsibility for what you choose to do, both with yourself and toward another human being. And I think that that's these messages that we still hear so clearly that I heard when I was in high school a long time ago is that it's up to the person, the target, typically woman or non-binary person that we're talking to avoid the harm that they're going to be vulnerable to, and that is often backed up by popular social media messages and the way that we even talk about how many women were raped, not about how many men raped women. And so I think that that's just indicative of where we tend to place a passive responsibility on the persons that are most vulnerable to these kinds of harms.
Absolutely. In addition, people talked about being careful on social media, not putting yourself or your body out there to welcome unwanted advances, right? Don't stay out late. Someone mentioned to be careful about flirting, right? Are you leading someone on? Are you being too nice to someone? Are you sending messages that would lead to someone acting on something that is your fault? Absolutely. I think uh, some messages that I hear, I work a lot with like college athlete populations, and something that's become a common narrative is for uh, athletes on men's teams to want to protect their team reputation. And so in that way, they're like, if you are navigating a sexual encounter, to almost like people will like record having consent so that they have proof if they were to ever be accused, right? That there's all these that you don't want to mess up, because then that looks badly for the rest of the team. So if you're going to do something, make sure it's like really clear cut and that you have all the evidence you need to back up that you're in the right, regardless of whether you treated someone with respect or not. It's about like checking the boxes. Um, yeah. Conversations about sexual assault or prevention weren't around, which contributed to its prevalence. Absolutely, that like silence perpetuates this narrative and these systems and these norms. And I think that that's something that we forgot to mention at the beginning of the slide deck, but that this silence can feel like a protective factor. That if we're not talking about sexual violence, or we're not talking about sexual assault or domestic abuse, kind of all the ways in which people treat each other with harm, that it won't come up or it won't happen, or that it isn't our responsibility to deal with. And I think there's especially a very like valid anxiety as people who are responsible for the well-being of young people, especially like in this context, high school athletes, right? That if you're a coach, you don't want to open that door. You don't want to open that conversation with your athletes, because there is a complicated system to navigate that is um, like at stake with your job, or making like as a mandated reporter. There's all these systems, and I think that as athletes, as leaders, we want to recognize that those anxieties are very real and very valid, and that that responsibility is still there, whether or not we're having those conversations, right? Um, that the whether you're talking about it or not, this violence is still happening, right? That these are still things that your athletes are experiencing and dealing with on a day-to-day basis within their communities, and that we are hoping to provide our like Team Up Washington coaches, or the people who engage with these sessions, with the tools that they need to be able to handle these conversations with more confidence, so that it doesn't have to be a choice between silence and what feels like maybe like a floodgate, right? Rather that there are steps in between. You don't have to be an expert in this topic or in this system to be able to talk openly about this kind of stuff. And rather that the more we can arm ourselves with the tools and the narratives about respect, integrity, equity, right? All these things that are intrinsic to sports in itself, the more that we can kind of bridge this gap between what feels like protective factor, which is silence, but really is like perpetuating harm.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we too just note that while you don't have to be an expert to lead these conversations with student athletes and to shape the conversation around how folks are talking about it within our teams, it's also important not to do it alone, which is why I just want to point out Bryn and Ruben as partners that you can reach out to in your community, who are very knowledgeable about this work, about advocacy, about prevention, and about the how to build on the strengths available to student athletes in their community, and how to have those conversations in a way that is both safe, inviting, and inclusive. And then also, I think that inevitably what we've heard from coaches is that as you open the door to these conversations that are on the minds of almost every young person in school, that you will invite conversations with students around the concerns that they're experiencing, about some of the ways in which either they have experienced these harms, or in some cases, maybe even how they are concerned about how they've been participatory in these committing these harms. And I would just urge you to reach out to Bryn and or Ruben or us to seek support, guidance, but don't be afraid of those conversations. You literally just need to be a safe place where some person can talk to you, and where you can hear them respectfully, validate their experience, and then, if need be, get them connected to the important resources that they need in their community. And for that, in your community, there's no better experts than Bryn or Ruben right in your backyard.
Beautiful, yeah. And a lot of this kind of like action steps we will cover in the second session, which is much more about like how do we implement an athletes as leaders program within your community. So we will do a lot more connecting to those resources in that session. But thank you, Ward. That's important. Okay, I think we can move on to our next slide, which again, we are going to ask you all to scan that QR code and do a little bit of a group think tank brainstorm, right? Not only do we hear these messages about how to prevent sexual assault in general, we also hear these harmful messages tied back directly to sports, right? And so I would love to hear people's answers. What are some of the harmful narratives they hear within their sports community, and why might they be negative, right? Why might they be harmful? Why is the phrase, right, pain is weakness leaving the body, uh, a harmful narrative that could perpetuate unhealthy relationships? Um, So go ahead and scan that QR code. You might have to click to the next question, which should be on the bottom left, I believe, of your screen. So there we have 4 questions. The first one we just answered, which is what brings you to the session. And then if you click the next arrow, it should bring you to the second question, which are what are harmful sports narratives you hear in your communities? Okay, let's see. I'm going to share my screen. And we can see kind of how this word cloud. Yeah, and here should be the QR code if you didn't have the chance to scan it yet. Yeah, I hear this a lot, right? Boys will be boys, especially in the sports narrative, in the sports community, right? Whether it's like an aggressive tackle or um or something that happens off the field, right? It's like, oh, that's just what it means to be a boy. Yeah, never show weakness. Yeah, being vulnerable with your emotions, whether it be about your game or how someone like treated you during the game, that showing weakness uh, is a negative thing.
Elise, I saw a chat preview, that I think it only allows 20 words.
Oh, okay. That's
So if
good to
folks
know.
have more in-depth answers, do you want them to put it in the chat?
Yeah, let's do that. Perfect. Yeah, I think the setting that we're doing is like a word cloud. Only 20 letters. Okay. So yeah, feel free to do it in the word cloud. Really practice your condensing skills, but if you want to say as much as you'd like without any restrictions, feel free to go for it in the chat and we'll highlight it as well. Ooh, I liked this respect equals fear answer, right? This idea that, like, in order to gain respect on the field or in the athletic space, that you have to like instill fear in your enemies or vice versa. Um, yeah, someone said if you don't try hard enough, you are not cut out for the team. This kind of like exclusive narrative. Uh, this is a very strong message that I think is prevalent today, but I like experience at the highest level in my youth club days. We had someone quit the team because of the kind of like bullying that was happening to them through the team and from the coach. And so when they chose to leave, right, they just didn't come back to practice one day, and our coach brought us all around. And they're like, oh, this person isn't cut out for the level of competition that we're demanding. And so this creates this dynamic that it's like, well, you are here because you're better than someone else who just doesn't belong. Absolutely. Focus on status, absolutely, right? That this status, whether it be playing time or economic status, what type of like materials and equipment you can afford, your win and loss streak, right? Status within a league or your community. Absolutely, that like the purpose is to be as elite of a person or a player as possible, regardless of how you might be like climbing over others in order to do that or disrespecting others in order to do that. I love it. Some other examples. Right. Yeah. If you don't have enough money to do your sport, the pay to play model in the United States is absolutely insane and really creates this like economic elitism within sports. That like if you are here, it's not because necessarily you deserve it, but it's like because you could pay your way to get there. And same thing, like the more elite you get, right? Like I had so many teammates who, you know, had 3 private sessions a week with their pro player one-on-one mentor, and those sessions are like $100 an hour. Like on top of the 5 grand it requires to be on the travel team, right? So that there's like an inherent sense of uh economic status built into sports as well. And that trickles down even into the high school space, 100%. Let's see some other examples are like that you have to sacrifice everything to win, right? Like being a winner means that you give everything you possibly have, even if it's past your boundaries. That you have to prove that you belong in one way or another, whether that's through economic status or grit or sacrifice. That coaches have to force you to your limits to get the best out of you, or that teammates have to force you to your limits to get the best out of you. And that all of these things, right, are messages that we hear about suppressing boundaries, giving up bodily autonomy, exclusion and marginalization, right? Comparison between people over intrinsic competition, right? It's okay to be competitive, but it's not okay to compare yourself over someone else to make you feel better, right? And these like hierarchy and obedience, power instead of mutual respect, that these are the ways that we bring the best out of athletes are all super harmful narratives that you all identified. We are going to stay in this poll and just shift to the next question, which is the opposite, right? What are some of the positive or healthy messages that you either emphasize or that you hear emphasized in your community that make your team or the young people that you work with better and more successful? What are some of these narratives that are a part of either sports or the broader world that kind of combat this and do the opposite of the harmful narrative? Yeah, do your best, right? That is the competition. That people matter, right? That everybody's valuable in the team space, regardless of their skill or talent, that it takes a team to win. Yeah, to not give up, resilience. I think that resilience is an intrinsic part of sports that is so easily squashed in young athletes because there is such a focus on achievement. And I would not be, I think Erin mentioned before that I'm a professional athlete. I'm no longer a professional athlete. I have very gladly retired from that part of my life, but I would never have become a professional athlete if it weren't for programs like Athletes as Leaders that helped me understand the benefits of sports. I've never planned to become professional, and I had so much fun doing it by lessening the pressure for myself that I just continued to do it. And obviously was lucky enough that the pathways were kind of there for me. But these messages like don't give up, do your best, that everyone has strengths, that right, teamwork makes the dream work. It's my dad's favorite phrase. That you matter, right? That these are all messages in sports that allow young people to continue accessing community because it's a community that is supportive, that makes them feel that they belong, that gives them tools to be competitive and have drive that is intrinsic to their own talents and their own potential, right? Yeah, right. Practice makes us better. That these are things that bring us joy, that I love practicing. I could practice all day without, playing a game because that tool of getting better at something systematically is something that we take away from sports. Absolutely. I love this. If anybody has any more that they think of along the way, feel free to pop it in the chat or continue. We're going to move on for the sake of time because I want you all to get kind of into the content. But so I'm going to stop sharing and Jessie, you can continue, right? But some of these, right, these are messages that help us kind of instill this sense of intrinsic value, right? Team cultures that value diversity are that these messages are also not only messages that help individuals, but they're also like successful team messages. That this is when we focus and bring these things out of sports, that we also make ourselves more successful. And I think that that's part of what we want to be tapping into when we are talking to coaches or when we are using these narratives in our sports community, is that the stronger that we can be together, the more successful we can also be, right? And that's an important motivating tool for young people. Jessie, I'm not seeing your screen, but that is that just me? Oh, okay, beautiful. I do see it now. Perfect. Right. And that we really do believe, and this is true, right? We talked about the harmful messages that are in sports and the positive messages that are in sports. Regardless of which way it is, we know that sports has an impact on the way that young people are experiencing their lives, and that we kind of have this choice of, through our intention, continuing harmful impacts or making purposefully positive ones. And similarly to the things that we were talking about before, right? Whether we talk about it or not, sports is about relationships. And these messages are already in our teams. They're passed down from years and years of what it has meant to be successful for your community or your team, traditions, right? Or your family. And so this means that this violence is also already in our teams, right? And that by shifting the core message that we use to motivate young people and empower them to be the best possible athletes that they can be, that we have the power to change the violence and the messages that are intrinsically passed down. Okay, I think I want to move on to our program. Beautiful. So this is a list of the 10 core sessions, including a preliminary preseason session. These are the 11 sessions of Athletes as Leaders. You can access these sessions at any time directly through the website. So if you go to athletesasleaders.org, you can click the program tab, and all of these programs are downloadable. You can view them at your leisure. We're going to spend some time right now and just get into a little bit of the content by picking and choosing some of these sessions and answering a discussion question that is a part of the script. We are going to go through a full script and practice facilitating on Thursday. So we're not going to go through like the technical structure of each session. Rather, we really want you to get a sense of like the content, like what does it mean, like to be standing up there, and what is Athletes as Leaders even talking about, right? So we are going to move, and I think the preseason one is a great one to start with. We'll do this for about 10 minutes. I would love for you all to answer this question for yourselves. You can do so in the chat. You can also unmute. And these are, again, sessions that are taken directly out of the script that you would be implementing with your students. So this helps us kind of like practice getting familiar with the language of Athletes as Leaders, and putting ourselves in the shoes of the athletes that we are facilitating with, right? So one of the questions during the preseason session is, what would make you feel welcomed if you were a new player? Again, feel free to unmute or put in the chat. And we're hoping this is kind of like a rapid fire. We'll see how well that goes. But ideally, maybe if we do 1 minute per question, then we can get through all 10 sessions. Ooh, everyone learning my name. I like that. Yes, to have coaches introduce me and where I am from. Beautiful. You can also, you can put yourselves in the shoes of the athletes. You're also welcome to like answer as who you are right now today. In the context, this is also a good way to practice. Like if you are implementing a session and you come up across a question and the athletes don't have anything to say, this is a great time to kind of brainstorm some examples that you might have in your back pocket to kind of fill in the space. Beautiful. Love it. Okay, let's move on to session 1. Oops.
All right. Oh, I went to session 2. Sorry. There we go. Elise, do you want to take turns on these?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the next question that gets posed in session 1 is think about a group where you have felt comfortable expressing yourself, and specifically what helped you feel like you were able to fully participate in that group.
Someone said, the leader made me feel comfortable and part of the group. I love that, the power of leaders. I'm just going to go ahead and interact with you all. I feel represented and that other people share my common experiences. Yeah, that there's a lack of judgment from others, that the space feels like safe and open, like I can be my authentic, quirky, silly, unique self. People aren't going to judge me for that. Being able to joke, yeah, having like a sense of a lightheartedness. Okay, perfect. Should we move to session 2? Ooh, someone said boundaries and agreements. I like that. So we're all on the same page about like what is okay and not okay in the space. Session 2, our question, why is it sometimes difficult, right? Okay, so session 2 is understanding privilege and oppression. One of the discussion questions is, why is it sometimes difficult for people to see their own privilege? And some of the questions include possible answers. So feel free to browse those and pick or think of one that feels important to you. Someone says, because privilege is subjective and not everyone sees it in the same way. I think definitely there's almost infinite ways to view privilege, or privilege shows up in every way. And so the ones that feel important to some people might not resonate with others. Absolutely. Some people have never been challenged in their way of thinking and don't know anything else, right? Some people don't grow up in diverse communities or diverse places. And so those differences might feel less obvious. Um, some people don't feel the burden of their comfort and what was required for one person to feel comfortable at the expense of someone else. I like this. A person might be working so hard towards a goal that they don't take the time to observe where they are in the moment. Absolutely, we can kind of get so focused on our own individual path that we might not see the way it's impacting others, or how other paths are different. I love that. Perfect. Should we go to the next one?
All right, so session 3 is challenging harmful stereotypes. So one of the questions within that session is, what are some different expectations that people have for boys in your sport versus girls in your sport? And some additional follow-up questions are, why is this concerning? And what message does that send?
Yeah, someone said that uh, there's an expectation that girls are allowed to express their feelings and boys are not. And then there's also like a nuance to this where it's like boys are expected to like really adamantly celebrate their wins in ways that girls are not. Like that like having a really rambunctious celebration after scoring a goal was never like a big thing in my experience, but then I'd always watch like the boys games and like you score a goal and like you run the entire perimeter of the field with your shirt off and like how that like would never that's not a norm for girls in the way that like we're like expected to not be flagrant about our wins in that way. Boys, yeah, expectation or narrative that boys are faster, stronger, bigger, and tougher than girls. And in opposition to that, that like girls shouldn't be strong, tough, or fast. I remember being in high school and our coach wanted us to do push-ups, and our entire team decided that we didn't want to do push-ups because we didn't have want to have boy arms. Absolutely. Boys are expected to have strong, hard workouts and not complain. And this is super problematic, right? Especially when we hear about like the university I was just working with, their preseason, they invited a I think like the Navy to come and like do a preseason, like run a preseason workout with their like men's football team, lax team. And a bunch of the athletes passed out. And there was no sign of it until it was too late, right? And so this idea that, yeah, you're expected to be like pushing to your limit and that any sign of like going past your limit is weakness. Erin to have boy arms. Right. You bet your bottom dollar that I was having those boy arms. That's so funny. Okay, moving on to session 4. Addressing misinformation and bias is the 4th session. We use topics in this session specifically geared towards the LGBTQ plus community and people with disabilities. But the questions are general. So, for example, one of the discussion questions is imagine a person says something hurtful that seems based on misinformation about a specific group. You can use the queer community or people with disabilities as an example. What are some ways to help them recognize it, right? So imagine a person says something hurtful about queer people or people with disabilities. What are some ways to help them recognize it? A lot of the answers that we get in teams are being like, that's not cool. Asking questions to help them understand. Absolutely, right? Like, why would you say that? What do you mean by that? Maybe a few more. I think a good one that applies a lot in the like college context is be like, that's not what we're about here on whatever, women's volleyball. Yeah, just reinforming people, be like, I know a lot of people say this, but actually it's really harmful or like that's not true. Absolutely. Okay, perfect. Let's move on to session 5.
It's my turn. Sorry. Session 5 is unpacking beauty standards. So one of the questions associated with this session is what beauty standards would you like to unlearn and how can you unlearn them? And I think this, as we're going through and kind of updating our curriculum to be really gender neutral, we'll probably change language around this because I think most people, we've been socialized to associate beauty with people who are feminine or women. So I think we'd probably change this and we can change it here now to like what are standards around appearance that we need to unlearn. And we obviously know there are very gendered ways that boys are told they're supposed to look and that girls are told they're supposed to look, which then leads to transphobia against people who don't fit within those boxes. So yeah, for this space, we can frame it as what our standards that we get told about how we're supposed to look and present to people.
Yeah, new norms. I was working with a track team that was all gender. And they, after this session, after the specifically like the beauty standards session, they all decided that they wanted to call the time um, at the end of their track workouts, core instead of abs, because they didn't want to set the expectation that they were all supposed to have abs, rather that they were just training their cores to be stronger for their specific events. I would also like, obviously, I haven't, well, maybe not obviously, but I haven't competed on a men's team. Um, and I maybe naively was surprised to hear how much fear of being fat, like fat phobia, there was in men's sports spaces. That like athletic body types are supposed to look a specific way, strong, lean. Um, and I think that this, uh, yeah, especially in running, I think, yeah, highlighting like cardiovascular or like, yeah, big cardiovascular sports like running, swimming, um, Nordic skiing. I don't know why that comes up for me, but like that these very cardio intensive sports are all about kind of like this distance, and having the ideal body type to go the longest that you possibly can, and how there is an exceptionally strong narrative around aesthetic and body type and athletic body type in some of these sports. Absolutely. Okay. Maybe let's do two more, Jessie. Or like someone said, yeah, boys are told to dress down and girls are told to dress up. Yeah, based off of like what it means to be provocative. Okay, session 6 is ending rumor spreading and shaming. One of the discussion questions is, what if a sexual rumor or name calling were being spread on social media instead of in person? What could you do to help in this situation? What if sexual rumors or name calling were being spread on social media instead of in person? What could you do to help in this situation? Talk about it at practice. Yeah, so much of social media like happens not in silence, right? Is never like spoken out loud, but is always like being talked about. And being able to call something out, being like, hearing rumors during warm up or whatever about, oh, did you see what blah blah said on commented on this person's post? Like being able to call that out and be like, on this team, it's important to remember that we don't spread rumors, or call anybody names, even if it's on social media. Yeah, the importance of its impact. Yeah, just bringing it to light, because I think that so much of the power of social media is that you feel like you can say whatever you want regardless of the consequences because you're not doing it to someone's face. And then like so being able to shine light on it and bring it into the real kind of like interpersonal space and being like just calling it out. Absolutely. Checking in on the target. Absolutely being like, hey, I heard this thing was being posted about you or whatever. Like, I just want you to know I don't think that that's cool and you deserve more respect than that. Absolutely. And reporting, preferences around reporting. That's absolutely something we're getting at into for the second session. Okay, fantastic. We have about 10 more minutes. I think we should move on and leave some time for questions. So that's through session 6. Session 7, 8, and 9, you can look into on your own time. Again, all these things are on athletesasleaders.org. We can also send out this slide deck. We're gonna go over quickly the impact and kind of survey data. Oh, thank you, Erin. And then we'll leave room for questions.
Yeah, so we always like to end at least day one by really kind of highlighting and uplifting the feedback that this program has gotten from both coaches and athletes. So we have here, I've become a more positive person on and off the court. This is from a student athlete. A coach also said the program gave me the tools I needed to advocate for social justice, promote a culture of safety and respect, all while meeting my number one goal as a coach to build confidence with the athletes on my team. Then another athlete said, Athletes as Leaders has fundamentally changed me as an athlete. Going through Athletes as Leaders in high school empowered me to challenge the unhealthy norms I encountered in college, right? So we know that this programming has not just an impact, but a positive impact on everyone involved, including coaches, which I think is something that should be named as well, that we also want this program to be something that coaches feel like they're getting something out of as well. So as Elise mentioned, there was a national evaluation study that was done out of University of Pittsburgh during the 2017-2018 school year. So 268 athletes across 12 teams across 8 states were interviewed or were given the opportunity to provide their feedback on this program. And based off of those evaluation results, we saw that the program leads to improved ability to identify abusive behaviors, improved belief in gender equity, as well as an increased level of positive self-image and confidence within leadership that youth who go through the program end up experiencing. So again, this result, like obviously you're hearing Ward and Elise and I talk about this program really positively because it's the program that we help to facilitate. But we're not just biased. We know that this is a program that is really intentional and grounded within evidence-based practices and within results that we know based off of these results, and also just qualitative data that we're able to hear from folks that this program is meaningful and again supportive to not just the athletes involved, but the coaches as well, and ideally the broader community within that school. So yeah. So our next session, we'll meet again on Thursday, same time, from 12 to 1:30. Next time we're going to focus really heavily on facilitation tools and techniques, just so folks feel confident as they're navigating these conversations. There's also going to be an opportunity to practice, both an opportunity for you all to see a mock session and then engage in a mock session yourselves. We'll do something called a readiness brainstorm. It's important to do some reflection before diving into these conversations in this programming. And then we'll also have time at the end for questions from you all as well. But with that, I think that's our content for today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen to provide an opportunity for you all to ask any questions that you might have.
Thank you all for sticking through that with us. We made it.
And I'll make sure we'll put our emails in the chat. If you have a question that comes up between now and Thursday, I mean, you can save it for Thursday if you'd like, but you can also email us and just, email us in general if you have questions that come up. Please feel free to reach out to us.
I wonder if no one has any questions, any prepared questions. I am curious. I wonder if do these topics, obviously we didn't go through all the topics, but do they feel topics that are like relevant in your communities right now, like in the high school space? Are these topics that you feel are coming up for the young people that you work with? Yeah, some of them. Woohoo!
I've also been messaging some of you independently here on the Zoom call to get your favorite restaurant. In appreciation for your attendance here at these trainings, we'd like to buy you lunch on Thursday if possible. Not all of the places. I was just going to do DoorDash, obviously thinking as a Seattleite that anybody would have access to DoorDash. And so that hasn't panned out so much. Susan, I was able to find a restaurant near you that I hope suffices. That is, let's see, where was it? Now I'm trying to remember. Mo's Coffee House. And then Anna, also I'm looking for a place in Kennewick. If you have a place, I can reach out to them independently and see if they would be able to deliver that up likewise.
Susan's like, I don't want Mo's.
No, they're actually very good.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So you should get that via your email, Susan. You should see a gift certificate appear in your email address.
You're serious?
Yes.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, thank you so much for that word. That's very, very kind. And so if nobody else has any other questions for today, I think we'll go ahead and say thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you all at noon on Thursday, same Zoom link. And we're looking forward to it. Bring your lunches. So it's onward. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Y'all.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.